Hey guys, it's Ashton from MuseThemes. Today we're looking at our Facebook Photo Albums widget. It's a really awesome way to embed a photo album from any Facebook business page, and it's very adaptable in the way that you can showcase the photos. On the top of our live demo here, we've placed the widget into a slider and set it to display small thumbnails, which is cool. And down here we get this larger grid type of gallery. You can see by hovering over the images, it gives you this nice overlay, which is totally adaptable. And clicking this icon opens the photo in this larger, really slick light box with navigation arrows. You can use this widget multiple times on the same page to display an array of albums, and it works great and responsive. So it's a really awesome widget, and we'll jump into Muse and take a look on how to get it set up and link to an album. First, we'll drag out the widget from the library panel, and all we get is this one gallery component here. And I'll go ahead and center it on the page. Now you're free to size this up however you wish. The vertical sizing doesn't matter so much because the widget is going to take up as much space as you set it to in your settings panel based on the size and number of thumbnails it's set to display. But you just want to make sure that the widget isn't overlapping any of your other content because it could cause the widget to not properly push down the content beneath it on the page. But horizontally, you have lots of freedom here. The widget comes set default to responsive, but you can make it full width as well, which I'll go ahead and do for this demo. So if we check out the flyout panel, there's lots of styling options that we'll get into in a moment. But first, let's take a look at these two fields. The Facebook Business Profile ID. This is the one piece of information that you need to get from Facebook. So I'm going to jump over to the MuseThemes Facebook page and we'll take a look. I'm at the Photos page here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Timeline Photos. And as soon as I do, it brings up the page for this specific album. And if you check the URL, towards the end here, you'll get this string of numbers here. This is your album ID. So we'll go ahead and copy these numbers and jump back into Muse. And we're going to paste those numbers into that first field. Now, the unique gallery ID, this is something that you as the designer need to come up with, which all it does is give a name for the browser to associate with this particular gallery. So it can really be pretty much whatever you want, but the reason for having it is that if you're using multiple galleries on the same page, the browser needs to be able to differentiate between them. So for right now, gallery 1 will suffice. So already, if we go ahead and preview this in the browser as it stands, we are already rocking and rolling. We have all of our timeline photos here. It's displaying full width, and I can shrink the browser down and the gallery will automatically shift itself and push down the page content, which is pretty awesome. So now let's take a look at some of our styling options here back in the flyout panel. The first section here is the thumbnail settings. Number of thumbnails. This is going to tell the widget to initially display this number of photos only before we reach the Load More button at the bottom. The thumbnail height and width you can set here. They were a bit big before, so let's go ahead with 250 pixels for both. Thumbnail scale option. Now this sets how the photo will be displayed within the thumbnail size that you've set. So you just saw the scale to fill option, but if we switch this over to scale to fit, we can go ahead and preview it in the browser again, and you'll see a substantial difference. So now you can see our smaller thumbnails as we already set, and the photos are now fitting in the space provided instead of scaling up to fill it. So let's go back into the settings panel, and I'm going to go ahead and keep this at scale to fill, just for personal preference. Thumbnail filter. This sets how the photo will look when you hover your mouse over it. So keeping this at overlay will keep these color and opacity options active. Right now it's set to cover it with black at 0.6 or 60%. But changing this to sepia, grayscale, or blur allows for a different look. I'm going to go ahead and go with sepia for right now. Thumbnail padding is a cool feature. It adds some space between all the photos if you don't want them all butted up right against each other. And this looks especially cool on larger galleries. So we have a lot of photos here, so I'm going to give this a padding of 20 pixels. Here we have font family, size, and color, which applies to the content in the thumbnail overlay. View icon size and color will change that eye-shaped icon displaying at the center of the thumbnail overlay. We'll go ahead and leave it to white, but I'm going to increase the size up to 40 for now. And lastly here you have the overlay for your lightbox background. You can set the color here and how much opacity you want the background to fill. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to 90%. Now this lower section here is for our Load More button settings. Now your first option is to keep this set as default, in which all these styling settings below here apply, such as the color, the fonts, and the size, and you can even change the button text down here as well. Or you can set this to custom and create your own button from scratch. So let's go ahead and create a button. I'm going to drag a state button down from the regular Muse widget panel, and we'll go ahead and give it some styling. I like the rounded edges, but we'll delete the circle. We can center the text and type, let's see, Seymour. We'll go ahead and give it a white fill and a black stroke. Cool. Now let's check out the rollover state. Great, everything looks good. So now we just have to assign a graphic style to this button. So to do that, you'll visit your graphic styles panel over here on the right. And with the state button selected, you're just going to click this little icon to create a new style. Then double click on it to name it, and we'll go with button 1. And lastly, you just have to return back to your settings panel for the widget and make sure the button is set to custom. And we'll type our graphic style in there, button 1. And we'll go ahead and preview it in a browser once again. And there, we have all our padding still applied, our larger view icon, which looks good. Our sepia overlay is working, lightbox looks good. And our custom load more button with a nice rollover state is displayed. And when clicked, it expands the gallery even further. So that's our Facebook photo albums widget. Thanks again for watching, guys. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, we're all ears. And until next time, happy designing.